what's something that you've done to help maximize the team's productivity? Or what is the cost to you if you are going to be bringing on new communities? Like how are you analyzing those things to make sure like this is the right move forward?
Yeah, which is a great question. And the simple coy answer would be is we turn down more properties than we accept. Don't sell on price. That same as banking. I mean, I can't remember if I said this term earlier or not, but I like to say, you may not like my story, but at least I have one. Create a story, incentivize. Well, I'll only charge you $1,500 a month instead of $2,000. Yeah, no. And that's symptomatic of selling a commodity-based product or service, is you have to differentiate yourself. And if you buy on price or sell on price, you're going to die on price.
All right. So thanks, Kurt, for joining me today. For our listeners, Kurt Andrae is the district manager of Guest Services Condominium Division, with serving over 4,000 doors and with 38 communities across luxury condominiums. So hi, Kurt. Good morning.
Miryam, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Kurt, I want to start by understanding your journey into the management industry. You have a lot of other hats that you've had to get you here today. So I'd love to know or share with my audience what is your journey? What is your entrepreneurial journey?
Well, obviously, I've had a lot of hats, and taking them on and off has made me lose my hair, which just is a signal that I'm old. Obviously, when I first started out in my professional career, which was back in the early 90s, I would have never thought that I would be sitting here having a podcast with you talking about the property management industry and specifically managing luxury condominiums in Southwest Florida. I started off, I'm a banker by training, started off in Chicago, but what was interesting, I was a credit analyst fresh out of college, and there was a little recession going on in the early 90s, and the bank that I was working at had a bad real estate portfolio. So I was just doing boring credit analysis stuff, and I was sitting across from one of the real estate lenders who had two phones going. He's moving, he's shaking, he's swearing, he's foreclosing on people. And I'm like, that looks like fun. I want to do that. So I morphed into a commercial real estate lender, and I wound up for 15 to 20 years lending money to developers building high-rise condominiums, both in Chicago and Milwaukee. So I had that exposure because obviously, once they were built or during the building process, they were creating the associations, who was going to manage it, that kind of fun stuff. And then while you mentioned the E word, entrepreneur, I had an incredible time in banking, but decided to jump off and become a developer myself. And so I became a developer creating single family lot subdivisions using open space techniques, conservation subdivisions. And it was great. I loved it. And obviously, while not luxury condos, I was involved with creating the homeowners association and managing the homeowners associations until they were turned over to the homeowners. But I could smell a change in the headwinds about as early as 2006. I saw the market turning, and I jumped back into banking. And then we obviously all know what happened in 2008,
Yes.
2009. So knock on wood. So during the mid 2000s, I was again in banking. And I just kind of decided that I ran my course. I mean, banking was fun, quite frankly, before the crash in 2008. And since then, banking is just a totally different industry. As much as I love what I'm doing now, I will say it is not my dream job. I did have my dream job. I was the operating partner of a wholesale wine distribution company.
Oh, okay.
So that I loved going to the office.
Yes, you could still have that dream job.
That's right. But long story short, it was January 2019. I let my dog out. I was living in suburban Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I let my dog out, and it was 20 below zero temperature, 40 below wind chill. And I said, yeah, I think it's time for me to shake things up a little bit. So I was dating a woman at the time, long distance, and she lived down here. And I said, well, let's see if it's going to work out. I have nothing tying my feet to Milwaukee anymore. So I came down. It'll be in 3 weeks. It'll be 7 years that I've been down here.
Wow.
And obviously, as I indicated, I didn't really want to go into banking. And to be frank, while this area is absolutely booming, there are not a lot of jobs that pay what I was used to making. And banking and property management are about the only two that could support me and my family to the way that we were used to. And I joined up with a large property management company, and that really kicked off my career. But it's what's unique about my story, at least within the property management industry, is I've never been what I would call an operating manager. I've never
Mhm.
been on site. I've never had a portfolio of properties. I was fortunate enough, and I guess that's because of my age and experience, to kind of segue right into a regional slash district manager role. So,
Mhm.
and I know we'll probably get into this in more detail, but that's really what my background is, human capital and relational management. I joke around with my managers. It's like, I can't tell you how to do your job because I've never done it before. But my job really as their manager is to encourage, develop, and support them. I joke around with people and my managers that my main role as a district manager at Guest Services is to be a shrink, to be a sounding board.
Yeah.
Because, as probably all the people that will be listening to the podcast who are in this industry know how intense it is. And we are a seasonal area down here in Southwest Florida, obviously. So we say our season starts from October to Easter, wherever Easter
Right.
ends. And those, I mean, and you could tell the telltale signs of when season starts or when the car carriers arrive. And you could tell when season's ending when the car carriers come back and pick up the cars. But during that 6 months, plus or minus 6 months, it's absolutely crazy. And I don't want the listeners to think that it's all rainbows and unicorns after, come May when people leave. Well, actually, our people are busier in the summer because of all the projects. I like to say, in addition to the season when our owners are back in, we also have annual meeting season, which
Mhm.
is in the spring of the year, and then the dreaded H season, which actually we're recording this at the end of May, and on June 1st, the hurricane season in Florida officially kicks off from June through November. Then we have budget season,
Mhm.
and also during the summer is project season. So our managers are under intense pressure all year round. And if we don't have a storm, that's wonderful. We all hope that's the case. But if you throw in a storm, just creates utter chaos.
Oh,
And
of
it puts
course.
such incredible pressure on our managers because obviously I manage 10 or 11 property managers, and then they obviously manage their staffs and also to a certain extent manage their board of directors. So they need an outlet. And that's so me listening. If anybody asks me what's the most important skill that you need to be successful as a district manager in property management, I would say listening and empathy and compassion. And again, the three words I always say is encourage, develop, and support. They need to know they have somebody behind their back that when something happens. It is interesting. Last night I was at a board meeting and sitting next to my property manager, and as is bound to happen in Florida during the summer, there was a brief heavy rainstorm, and all of a sudden we heard this sound that sounded like water coming out of, or coming out of a faucet into a bathtub, and we're like, oh
Oh,
no. So
no.
property manager ran into the other room, and sure enough, a roof drain uncoupled and water was pouring in.
Classic.
So what am I going to do? So I took over the meeting because we're
Yep.
literally right in the middle of a board meeting, and he sprung into action and called the remediation contractor. And once we got it under control, I hopped on. Guess what? I hopped on condo control and sent out an email blast to the residents saying, "Hey, we've suspended the board meeting. We have the remediation company, the game room, the fitness center, and the guest
Oh
suites are
my
all
gosh.
closed for further until further notice. So, and afterwards, and obviously, again, it was just unique that I was there. But my manager was so thankful that A, I didn't get into the way of what he was trying to do, but B, that I took over the meeting, sent out the email blast. And so it's really having that support.
Yeah. And
And
you're
I
truly a
think,
team, right? Like
oh,
you're truly a team in those very unique situations. Maybe not unique, but those unfortunate situations where, the trauma bonding is real in
yeah,
management. Very
exactly.
real.
And I kind of weaved into a different area, but to kind of bring it back to your original question. So I was, when I first moved down to the Naples area, district manager at a larger property management firm, moved over to a smaller family run property management firm where I was actually not a district manager. I was the controller and head of the maintenance division, which was wonderful. I'd obviously been a banker, and I was also a small business consultant. I was very familiar with QuickBooks and HR and technology. So I was basically running this property management company. And then we were familiar with Guest Services. Anybody who's in the property management industry down in Southwest Florida is familiar with this company called Guest Services, and it's a very unique company and with a very niche focus. Everybody wants to work here because we have such great reputation and stuff. So when the opportunity came for me to join the organization, which will be 4 years ago, I absolutely ran at the chance, and it was the best and last career move I will ever make because it's such a great organization.
Sounds like you're a lifer now. I think that's
Yes.
good. I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing. So, kind of speaking about that, how has the industry then changed? Maybe last 3 years, the last 5 years from where you're sitting today as the district manager.
Well, that's a great question. And there are two main paradigm shifts that I've seen, which have really crystallized over the last 3 or 4 years, but definitely I saw starting out since I joined the industry 7 years ago. I would say first and foremost from an actual industry, the property management industry, it's very similar to banking in the sense that there has been a ton of consolidation. A smaller privately owned, family owned companies have been gobbled up by larger national and now international companies.
Mhm.
And the aforementioned company that I worked at before, just a few months ago, sold out to an international company.
Wow.
So there has been a significant shift in the ownership of property management companies. And over a 25 year career in banking, I've been through more acquisitions than I care to remember, both on the buy side, where we bought people, and the sell side, where I was part of the bank that was being acquired. And that experience has told me no matter what the people say, things are going to change. They always change. And especially, I mean, even though I've worked for some large banks, personally prefer the smaller community type bank and not the Wells or the Chase banks because you're just a number. And that's what I'm seeing in the property management industry as even though it may have been a small locally owned firm with 50, 60, 100 properties, as soon as they get acquired by a national or international firm, their focus, their culture, their motivation, everything changes.
Yeah.
And, they would obviously not say this, but their service level changes as well. So we've seen a lot of feedback from people in the industry, not only managers at other companies that are a part of this acquisition trend, vendors telling us, but as well as directors of various associations. So that's been a significant shift. And the other shift that we've seen is kind of the aging out, if you will, of the older generation. Naples really had their building boom back in I would say the 80s and 90s. So a lot of these original owners of the properties that we have specifically are aging out, and a new younger generation is coming in. And
Mhm.
that's You're going from people who are retired, who have absolutely nothing to do, and they live to breathe to run a board meeting, to somebody who's still running their company and comes down for a couple months, and they don't want anything to do with the running of the association.
Yeah.
And kind of a subset of that trend is what we're really seeing, and we've really capitalized on, especially, quite frankly, in the first quarter. Associations that have historically been self-managed are now open to considering and talking to, and three times in the first quarter for us, which is bringing on a lot of business for this company in one quarter, we brought on three self-managed companies, or you have self-managed properties,
Yeah,
excuse me,
communities.
that had been self-managed since their inception 20, 30 years ago. And the story is all the same in those three instances is younger board members are coming in. Hey, I'm not retired. I'm still traveling. I'm still running my business. I want a professional in here running it. And because obviously, if a self managed company or self managed property is a business,
Yeah,
because a condo
absolutely.
association is a incorporated business, and they don't want the liability, they don't want the time. So those are the two main industry trends that I've seen. And ours are, can I talk about guest services?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you're a great forecaster, so I want to hear everything.
Well, it's interesting that, we're such a unique company. And I want to give a little background about guest services because I think that'll give the listeners an insight of how we've been able to capitalize on both of these trends.
Yeah.
We're unlike any other company out there for a number of reasons. First and foremost, we don't have an owner. We are a non-stock company governed by an independent board of trustees. And this structure was created back in 1917. So we've been around almost 110 years. Initially organized in Washington, D.C. to feed and house draftees headed over to Europe for World War I. And the G in GSI, we call ourselves. The G is originally was for government. So we had very close ties with governmental agencies, and we've morphed over the years into what I would call three main divisions. First being food service. So we do a lot of private food services. We're still based in Washington, D.C., so we do a lot of food service for governmental and private industries in and around Washington, D.C. We do food service for like Florida Southern College and various other entities across the country. The other main bucket would be managing state and national parks throughout the country. And we have like Everglades National Park, Big Sur, Mount Rainier, for people up in the Northeast, Giants Ridge, Bear Mountain. So and we just brought in three state parks in Alabama this past quarter. So it's a very unique business line, to say the least. But at its core, Guest Services is a hospitality company. We're serving people coming to visit someplace. We also own a few hotels, the Doubletree in Naples, the Breckenridge in Colorado. So at our core, we are a hospitality company, and there is this little but growing, both in terms of size and quite frankly importance, division in Florida that they had, which managed luxury condominiums in the greater Naples area. And as every hospitality company found out when COVID hit, their income was variable. It was based on occupancy and usage. And here we were down in Naples, using a banking term, clipping coupons because our revenue is contractual with the association. So our CEO didn't have to think too long to say, hey, we need to, as a company, we need to grow that division. And that's
Absolutely.
when I brought in my associate and, well, quite frankly, my boss, Joanna Vasilescu, and I, over the last 4 years, have basically doubled the division in size and revenue. But we are very cognizant about what makes guest services different than our competition. And first and foremost is the fact that we don't have an owner. Our motivation is not to grow the company and sell because, quite frankly, nobody would get the money because we don't have an owner. The analogy I like to use is we're the Green Bay Packers of property management. So our governing documents, we're a fully taxable distributing C Corp, which means we need to distribute our profits to charities. So if we have excess profits, they're distributed to charity. And if we ultimately sell, all the profits would go to charity. So our motivation is totally different. And in the context of this wave of consolidation, knowing that we're not going anywhere makes our potential customers and also our existing customers feel very comfortable because it's a revolving door out there.
Oh yeah.
And the second thing that really makes us different within the marketplace is that our accounting division that supports us, that does the financial processing for our customers, are literally right behind that wall. They're right here. They're local. They have an average of 6 to 8 properties they work on. And our competition, I've heard companies, larger companies that outsource their accounting to Mexico. The project accountants have 30 to 40 properties each. And you just can't create that level of relationship and that financial comfortability, if that's a
Hmm.
word,
Yeah,
with your client when you're just a number.
that makes total sense.
Our customers are not numbers.
You want to be
And
able to pick up the phone and say, like, what is going on with this? Like that, I
bingo.
think in today's world, that is way more important than, having, yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's all and not to toot my own horn, I would consider myself successful in this position. And what has made me successful? And at first glance, you may think there's nothing connecting property management and banking. Well, it is. It's all relationships. We're basically in a commodity business. There's no bigger commodity than money. But I mean, there are dozens of property management companies across the country, let alone in Southwest Florida. So how am I going to differentiate myself? And this is what I did when I was a banker, or what I'm doing now, is it's relational. You
Mhm.
have to create a relationship. I always say, you may not like my story, but at least I have one.
Yeah.
Guest Services has the best story. I've worked for many companies and I call myself a closet marketer. We have a unique product that people will seek out, and we've doubled in size, as I said. And you know how many times Joanna and I have picked up the phone and called somebody? Zero. They call us.
Yeah.
And that's a marketer's dream. But we can't, the most important thing is we can't lose sight of what makes us unique. And we guard that very closely. And of course, the CEO would love us to grow more. And we're like, no, we only bring on 5 to 6 properties a year so we could absorb it. We've staffed up to probably allow for 18 months to 2 years of growth. The biggest thing that we're facing now, pressure from above, if you will, is why don't we try to duplicate this success in other geographic areas? And we're very hesitant to do that because it's hard to recreate relations. And going to just picking an area, Tampa and St. Pete, it would take years for us to recreate what we have in Naples up in Tampa and St. Pete. And going kind of tying it all back together, going back into the industry trends with the self-managed properties finally opening up their eyes and ears, quite frankly, to hear that our value proposition that, hey, you're supposed to be retired or you're supposed to be coming down to Naples to relax, and you come down here and you're running a business. That makes no sense. Whereas, and we could give them hard numbers because, of course, they see our fee. They've never paid, obviously, a management fee, and they see a management fee and their eyes bug out. And, well, what are we getting for this? And we obviously have our ducks in a row, and we tell them how our value proposition will translate into financial savings. But I always tell them, I'm a salesperson. I'm here to sell you something. Call our customers. Don't listen to me. They could call any one of our customers. Sure, we give them a list, but we also tell them, if we manage this building, and this person isn't on the list, we'll give you their contact information.
Mhm.
So
So just to be
it's
cheeky, how much does it actually cost you to take on a new community?
cost us or cost them?
Good question. Cost you, right? Because there's obviously a cost of doing business, as you were saying. To
Yes.
expand, you're losing, there is a concern of losing that comfortability, if you will, or that cozy vibe, or so
Yeah.
when you get too big, that's also a problem, like you were saying earlier. So, how do you also, I think it also comes around with, if you're going to take on a community, I'm sure you have to hire staff, right? There's a cost for that.
Mhm.
There's training for that. So what does that look like? Almost even to say, like, what is then your playbook for maximizing the productivity? Because you don't want to have too many communities, but
Exactly.
you do need to have your work-life balance for your managers. So, yeah, what's something that you've done to help maximize the team's productivity? Or what is the cost to you if you are going to be bringing on new communities? Like, how are you analyzing those things to make sure like this is the right move forward?
Yeah, which is a great question. And the simple coy answer would be is we turn down more properties than we accept.
Mm,
And that I don't say that from a boastful standpoint. I say it from an illustrative standpoint to show how unique and different our business model is. Because our competition is all about numbers.
the acquisition
And hey,
strategy is
I've
so
started
different.
businesses, I've sold businesses. Yeah, you want to build up the revenue to get the maximum price when you sell.
Mhm.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Unless you're one of those people that's a number in their minds and you're not getting the best service. So we are very cognizant about, and obviously we're more cognizant about the backroom staff because somebody's going to be managing that property, whether or not guest services is
Yeah.
managing it or not. So, but we want to make sure that we have the infrastructure behind the scenes infrastructure because the last thing we want to do is bring a customer in, sell them on how great we are, and then muck it up. And so it's just having the intestinal fortitude to say no. And we only manage luxury condominiums. I got a call this week for, even though it was a condominium, it's, kind of the single family home condominium set. That's not us. We don't do HOAs. We don't do commercials. We do luxury condominiums. And 90% of these that we manage are waterfront high rise condominiums. So our infrastructure is set up and we know how much manpower it takes to bring on a new property. So it's not rocket science. It's just basic forecasting and understanding that we don't want, and having that as our foundation, that we don't want to get too big too quick. We don't want to get over our ski tips because what makes us unique that we don't need to pick up the phone and try to find a customer. They call us. We guard that very intensely. And I don't want to say we've locked heads at times with our CEO because he's extremely supportive of us. But I could understand, well, let's keep it going. Let's grow it. But well, no, the reason we've been able to grow it, and as we tell people, we're not the cheapest game in town, but we're the best. And we could prove that based on our history. And one of the aspects that we're most proud of here is the tenure of both our customer base as well as our general managers. Because every association wants that consistency in the general manager position. And I would say, outside of accounting, which is really where the rubber meets the road in terms of the business of the condominium association. Our most important role is finding the right general manager. Do we get it right all the time? Well, of course not, because every community has its own personality. And we interview our customers to say, okay, what skills are you looking for in a general manager? And we'll go out and find a few candidates, present them, and more often than not, knock on wood, we do get it right. But if we don't, we go and try again. And another, nuance of this industry is boards change. So one board may think the general manager is great, and the other board may think they're awful. But I just bring that up because, having that consistency and not having a revolving door is extremely important. And, it's tough to do the calculations because we've grown so quickly. But if we look at our legacy, look at our properties that we had before we started this growth spurt, our customers have been with us an average of 11 years, and our managers have been at their property an average of 9 years. Nobody in the marketplace could touch that. And so it's just getting back to the context of the question. It's just being prudent and strategic that we're already talking about, bringing on an accountant, an additional accountant. We're fine with district managers. We have a capacity for one of my associates to have another 5 properties. So it's sitting down and being strategic is okay. In the next 18 to 24 months, if we bring on 10 properties, who's going to be the district manager? Who's going to be doing the accounting? So the cost of bringing customers in is really that human capital management and making sure, and having a 100-plus-year-old company that's extremely financially stable that can front that cost. Because as I said, we've been around 100 years, we'll be around another 100 years. So if and our CEO is formerly our CFO, and he's a CPA, so obviously he understands numbers inside and out, and he understands it's okay, we're going to have a little dip because we're bringing on an additional accountant or additional district manager, and rather than stretching the existing staff until they're ready to break and then bring somebody in, that's the worst thing you could do. And
Right. So hitting that growth ceiling it's a people problem. It's not necessarily process, it's not technology, it's
no,
just people, humans.
it's with people. And I would say that if I could amend one of my previous answers about the industry trend, I would like to add that finding good people is extremely difficult. And I think the larger industry trend is not as many people are coming into this industry as they did before.
Yeah.
Um,
A lot of people don't know what property management or community management is. Even for myself, I fell into it because someone told me that there was a job that I could do paper pushing, and I would leave early on Fridays at 3 o'clock. That was obviously all a lie, but that's, in school, I was never taught, and I lived in a house. And so I didn't know, what an apartment building or a tower, was. So I think there's, not to say a lack of education, but maybe the industry needs to promote ourselves more to the younger generation to say, being a TikTok star, being an influencer, sure, that looks great and dandy, but doesn't really pay the bills. And realistically, property management is pandemic proof, recession proof, like as you said, very steady. So why isn't the younger generation kind of coming to say, well, instead of I want to be a TikToker, it's I want to be a property manager. It's a very good job. It just maybe we need to work on the optics and marketing more. But yeah, there's even in, college or university, it's not something that people necessarily aspire to, which is a shame because there's a lot of good things that come from being like a community manager. There's a lot of life circles that you see that are, I think, very fulfilling. And that's being like on the ground level, right? Not necessarily being in head office, but it is really fulfilling to kind of see someone go through, maybe they get married, have kids, go through a divorce, start a business, get married again. And there's, that's a very small piece of someone's life that not everyone has privy to, especially with the age of internet where you're only posting the good stuff, you're only posting the positive stuff. But so to, go and help, an owner knowing that they're at a tough time, and then them being so grateful that you are empathetic or that you are willing to listen, right? Like that's AI will never replace that. Right.
Yep.
So that's where like technology and processes, you can have that down pat, but humans with humans, it's always going to be.
Oh, exactly. And I have my fingers in lots of pots here at Guest Services. And one of the things I kind of unofficially oversee is recruiting. And the two trends that I've seen is the vast majority of people applying across all our positions are older, second, third career type people. I'm not bashing that because guess what? That was me 7 years ago, trying to find a job down in Florida in an industry that, quite frankly, was new to me. Very few younger people. And there's a nuance with guest services because we're at I like to call property management a pyramid. And at the bottom of the pyramid, you start off because you got to work your way, obviously, get your foot in the door, as they
Hmm.
speak, is you're going to be an admin or you're going to be a portfolio manager.
Right.
Oh, God, I have more empathy for portfolio managers than anybody else in this industry, having to manage 10 to 15 properties. And then a hurricane comes, it's just, they don't get paid anywhere near what they deserve to be paid. But then you move up the pyramid, but at the tip of the pyramid in the property management industry, at least on the residential side, is to manage a luxury high-rise condominium. Why is that? Well, it's twofold. It's a high-rise building is a very complicated piece of infrastructure. And second of all is simply they could afford to pay the most money. So if you've been in the property management industry for 10, 15 years, your goal is to become a manager of a luxury high-rise condo because you'll be paid for that. And the other unique thing that I've seen is how many people from the Northeast are looking to come down to Florida.
Me. We had a really long winter here, so
But it's like, and there's always, if people know Florida, the stereotype in Florida is people from the Northeast will go to the East Coast of Florida and people from the Midwest will come down to the West Coast of Florida. And that's not true anymore. It's just very unique that, okay, here's this person that's from New York or New Jersey or Buffalo or something. And I'm like, well, I chuckle because, like you said, that was me.
absolutely. So knowing that, the firm focuses on luxury, what are the customer or how, I should say, how have the customer expectations shifted and what is driving those changes?
Would say that's kind of in sync with the gentrification, if you will, the age gentrification, because the older residents are more often than not the year-round residents, and their level of hospitality expectations are considerably higher than the newer snowbirds. And I think the newer, younger snowbirds have a little bit more empathy towards property staff, and they understand that, and especially around hurricanes. I think the greatest example of this is around the hurricane season, that if a storm's coming, the older established residents, if you will, expect the staff to stay on the property and cater to them, quite frankly. And our policy is once the mandatory evacuation is ordered, GSI staff must leave the property.
Good.
But GSI staff, they're their own individuals, and we tell the board, hey, if you want to approach an individual and create an arrangement with them that they say, that's great, but they're doing so on their own. They're not doing it in the capacity of GSI. That's the older generation. That's kind of the expectation, and they get upset if that doesn't happen. The newer crowd is like, when are you getting out of here so you could go home and take care of your home and your family? So it's it's the older crowd. And again, that I'm generalizing. I
Yeah.
want to put it out there, and I don't want some 82-year-old resident of one of our properties
Eddie's
to.
gonna be calling you.
That's right. But it's definitely the level of empathy and the compliments and the support and the feedback that I receive from residents and directors is overwhelmingly from the younger generation, the newer generation. Very, very little from the more established residents.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
then what are you doing different with company culture then? Because the demographic is changing and because, the younger demographic seems to care about, maybe I shouldn't say that, but it feels that they are okay with someone having a work-life balance. How has that shifted, or what are you doing differently to make sure that can stay within what you share with your employees or with the firm or
Yeah, I don't think we're doing anything different per se. And you mentioned the C word, the culture word. And Guest Services has an incredible culture. I was fortunate enough to start or be formed early in my professional career. I spent almost 10 years at a bank called LaSalle Bank both in Chicago and then eventually in Milwaukee. And the culture there was so incredible that it allowed me to meet all my professional goals 5 to 10 years before in that I had in my timeline. And that's actually why I left to form my development company, because I'm like, well, I've accomplished everything that I set out to do. And not that I've, between leaving LaSalle and eventually joining Guest Services, I've been in good cultures, I've been in toxic cultures, and then I've been in cultures that I've created myself because I was the business owner.
Mhm.
But it is, I think you used the term lifer before. And once I got to Guest Services, the culture of the organization is so unique and so amazing and so wonderful and so supportive. That's allowed me to thrive, but that also extends down to our managers. And the word that encapsulates the culture would be support. So if in the context of what we're talking about, if one of our managers is at a property that's predominantly older and is not getting the recognition that they deserve from the residents, they get it from us. And for those, and I don't want to use the term jealousy because that's a pretty hard word, but they're properties that are younger, that are amazing. The managers glowing and telling their or associates that are quarterly managers meeting what a great property they are. And so some of those managers at the older properties will get a little jealous, but we don't treat anybody differently. We just give everybody the support. We're not micromanagers. That's the quickest way to lose a manager is to micromanage them, not only from me being their direct supervisor, but more often than not is boards. And that is,
Generation.
as I mentioned earlier, we just took over 3 self-managed properties. And for certain board members, because obviously we got the newer generation, for lack of a better word, got in there and convinced the association to come to a professional management company. But there's certain directors that are, I mean, they ran the association
Mhm.
with an iron fist, and now they have to give it up and walk away. And we don't like to have these conversations, but we have to have the conversations with certain board members or the board as a whole to say, hey, do you think John Doe or Jane Doe is a good manager? Good. Oh yeah, we love him and stuff. Well, then get off their back, because if you keep this up, they're gone.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Well, and
it's really giving them that support, both in the context of the employee-employer relationship, but in that's a unique nuance to this industry is our managers and all the on-site property staff are guest services employees. But guess what? The association pays their salaries.
Mhm.
It's a pass through, and we don't mark anything up. It's just whatever their salaries are, we pass it through to the association and they reimburse us. So they do have a lot of skin in the game with the on-site staff and our things working. And it is we use the term, and it's a correct term, it's a partnership that Guest Services has with the association. But that association is kind of an outlier. Here you have the employee-employer relationship, but then you have the association that's kind of got a dotted line.
yeah.
So we have to manage the board and we have to manage our employees, but we're nothing without our employees. So that's why, that level of support, when they're having nagging owners and stuff. And it interesting, just anecdotally, again, not to demonize, for lack of a better word, our owners. It's just this year was very unique that people seem to be more snippy and have a shorter fuse, and people by meaning owners, and
Mhm.
it affected our managers significantly. And that's
Absolutely.
why I don't go out that often. I'll go monthly. I'll go to the board meetings, mostly in person, but if not by Zoom. But I straddle going to see my managers in person, with not making them feel that I'm breathing over their neck, but they know they could call me 24/7 about anything. And they do. And once they get it off their chest, they feel so much better. But I fielded a lot more of those calls this year, especially I would say March and April. For some reason, people were just cranky.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's in a way, though, you kind of created your own, your own ecosystem because you provide support to your staff, and obviously they're supporting the communities. That also, though, just naturally helps then retain the communities because, like you were saying, your staff has stayed on for 9+ years. The communities stay on for 11+ years. You don't even need to necessarily worry because everyone, not to use the word family, but everyone is so comfortable and they know, like, whether it's a really bad, weather season or something is there's a lawn ornament or whatever that's not supposed to be there or whatever the case is, like there is really truly a commitment to each other, which I don't know if that is the case for all other communities. Like, it's true, like as you said, partnership, and where my brain goes is like marriage. Like, you are committed to each other, not only as an employee employer relationship, as a community. And that's a lot of people to be married to. That's a lot of personalities, right? So that I think it naturally, when you have that kind of thought process of that relationship, of that partnership, with that support, you're just naturally going to retain. So you almost don't even need to worry about that side of the business of, oh, are we going to have people leaving and how do we deal with, with burnout and things like that? Like, that's just not even a part of a conversation, it sounds like, just because you already are, again, forecasting to know, like, hey, we're hitting our growth here. We're going to take a pause, or we're going to like strategize so that there is not such.
Exactly. And you bring up a very good point. You used the term marriage. I would call it a sense of ownership that our managers and the on-site staff, because we had several on-site staff members who've been with us 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And you can imagine how beloved they are with by the owners. And that's something that and again, I'm just speaking from my experience because I've had the experience of working for two other property management firms. And obviously, I'm extremely familiar with the industry in Southwest Florida. Most general managers do not have a sense of ownership. They don't approach their job like this is my property.
Like the
And
agency.
I'm gonna treat it like my own. I'm gonna make the decisions. They clock in, they clock out. They don't care. And I think that's a symptom of the transactional approach that many of our competitors subscribe by. And hey, they've been successful. I'm not gonna bash them. But my entire banking career it was relationships. I've had several customers who I've lent tens to hundreds of millions of dollars to follow me to three different banks. Hey, the money's green. Doesn't matter where they're getting the money from. It's all green. They followed it because of the relationship I had with them. So we encourage, in lack of a better word, demand, if you will, that our managers create a relationship with their community. And that's crystallized, we know that crystallizes when that sense of ownership that when one of my managers says she won't spend $10 on a computer cable. She pulled out a box and is going through all these computer cables. And I'm like, it's $10. It's not your money. And she's like, yes, it is.
Hmm.
So when they have that sense of, again, ownership, and that's what makes the long-term relationship that Guest Services has with their clients, that's what cements it.
Excellent. I love that. All right, let's have a little fun. We're going to do a rapid fire now. So pick one out of the options here. So trade shows or lunch and learns.
Lunch and learns, 100%. I don't go to trade shows and lunch and learns. And that's, what word did we just use? Relationships. That's where you create the relationship with the vendors. And yeah, I don't know
They're
how
way
much
more
you
fun.
want me
Yeah,
to
lunch and
explain
learns are
yours.
way more fun. You actually get to eat. Trade shows, you're like exhausted at the end of the day.
Right.
All right, blood, fire, or flood. Now, you haven't really been a site manager per se, but you've
Well,
obviously
I
experienced.
haven't experienced a fire, unfortunately, one blood, but I mean flood because I had one last night.
All right.
I just got the video before I hopped on of the pipe spewing out water
Oh.
from last night.
Oh, oh, makes my heart hurt. All right, and last one, people, parking, or pets.
Well, people. I chuckled. I was going to ask, well, in what context? Who do I like better? Pets. But no,
I think I like pets. I think
but
I
no,
like
I mean,
pets.
I've been fortunate enough in almost all the steps of my long, varied career path to be successful. And what's the common theme throughout that? And that's creating relationships with people. You mentioned AI before. I walked into Chat GPT kicking and screaming because I'm a good writer. I love writing. I love writing emails and stuff like that. But then I was convinced to, well, throw it in the Chat GPT. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's kind of cool. So there's certain aspects that AI and one of the things we're seeing in AI, and maybe this could have been another industry trend, while meeting minutes, meeting summaries. Almost several of our managers are utilizing AI to do their minutes. Some are going to the extent of putting in bids and having AI compare the difference between the bids and stuff, and which is a great starting point. But I think you alluded to it earlier that AI is never going to replace people.
No, never. It'll
And
never
it's
replace the
all,
relationship.
yeah, it's all relationship based.
So I have two more questions. Yeah, and then we'll wrap it up. So I appreciate your time. So for leaders that are trying to grow their portfolio, what is the first thing that you tell them to do or fix, or what is one piece of advice so that they could grow?
Don't sell on price. That same as banking. I mean, I can't remember if I said this term earlier or not, but I like to say, you may not like my story, but at least I have one. Create a story, incentivize. Well, I'll only charge you $1,500 a month instead of 2,000. Yeah, no. And that's symptomatic of selling a commodity-based product or service, is you have to differentiate yourself. And if you buy on price or sell on price, you're going to die on price. So create the relationships.
All right. And then final question. What is one thing that you wish you did earlier in your career? It doesn't have to be property management. It could be banking. It could be anything else. And I know your dream job is in the wine sector, but what is one thing that you might have wished you've done earlier, or two, or five?
I'm having trouble with one. I don't want to sound coy, but I'm going to say this while I think of an answer. But what I'm saying is the absolute truth. I have never been happier personally or professionally than I am right now talking to you. So, part of me would say I wouldn't change a thing, because if I change something, I might not be sitting where I am now. And yeah, I don't want to sound coy, or I wouldn't change anything.
I'm glad
I
that
mean,
you're happy. Health is wealth.
yeah,
Happiness is like, gold. So,
yeah. I mean, I approved a loan back in 2008 that went south. And I would love to say I wouldn't want to approve that loan. But guess what? If I didn't approve that loan, the bank may have never sold and blah, 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 and I wouldn't be in Naples. So I look back in my long and varied career, and honestly, I wouldn't change a thing.
excellent. That's a perfectly good answer as well. All right. Thanks, Kurt, for joining me today. I hope you have fun. And of course, I wish you continued success.
Thank you so much, Miryam, for having me.
Absolutely.